It is officially hurricane season. Each year from June 1st through November 30th, tropical or subtropical cyclones are most likely to form in the Atlantic basin. Now, even though we are hundreds of miles from the coast, we still have to be aware of tropical systems, and Georgia has had its fair share of storms over the last several years. Meteorologist Melissa Nord shares this year's Atlantic hurricane outlook.
12 to 17 named storms, 5 to 9 hurricanes, and 1 to 4 major hurricanes. NOAA says there's a 40% chance of a near normal season. So what drives this year's outlook? Abnormally warm waters in the Atlantic and a 93% chance of an El Nino this summer. During an El Nino, more vertical wind shear is present. This means there's a change in the speed and direction of the wind, and it disrupts storm growth. But although this El Nino can slow storm growth, the abnormally warm waters in the Atlantic can mean quite the opposite. Having a high heat content can lead to rapid intensification when a storm's winds increase at least 35 miles per hour in a 24-hour period. This can be especially dangerous, like what we saw with Hurricane Michael in 2018. NOAA keeps upgrading its supercomputing system. The hope is that hurricane track predictions will be 15% more accurate this season and will help with the storm surge forecasts.
Well, here you have it, the names for the 2023 hurricane season. You see 21 names here, but what happens if a storm forms after 21, for example, after Whitney? Well, prior to 2021, the World Meteorological Organization would then go to the Greek letter alphabet. We saw that in 2005, where we had Katrina and Wilma, and also a very historic season in 2020, where we saw 9 names off this list become storms. It got very confusing once we got down to, say, Zeta, Hurricane Zeta that hit Louisiana. People thought that was the end of the Greek letter alphabet, but actually it was only the 6th named storm, went all the way to Iota, which was a major hurricane that hit Central America. So the World Meteorological Organization decided to get rid of this list to limit the confusion and came up with a supplemental list that started in 2021, and this is the list we would use if a storm happens after the 21 named storms that we already have. We'd start with Adria, Braylon, and end with Viviana and Will.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, gathers data by flying over, through, and around storms. The data helps identify the intensity of the storms and the forecast track. As meteorologist Andrew Wilson reports, drones are also helping the hurricane hunters collect necessary data.
Lieutenant Commander Becky Shaw pilots NOAA's P-3s, one of the few people on Earth who willingly fly into a hurricane.
I flew the whole 2021 season, and I think it's about 7 hurricanes.
But there are some areas even she won't go. Enter drones.
With these uncrewed systems, we can now collect data in the parts of the storm that we don't want to be.
NOAA has been testing 3 models of uncrewed aircrafts that drop out of the Hurricane Hunter planes and collect data in lower areas never before captured. A crew member will be flying the drone while on board the P-3.
We're going to launch it in a tube form. It'll spread its wings in flight, and it will fly at a low altitude while we're at our normal 8,000 to 10,000 foot altitude, and we'll be collecting data from both aircraft.
Unlike dropsondes, which take a snapshot of the conditions as they fall to Earth, the drones can stay in the air for hours.
To be able to fly at those altitudes in and out, it's going to change a lot of what we know about these storms.
The crews have been testing the aircraft's abilities to safely drop from the plane, stay in range, and collect accurate information. And now they're being sent into actual storms. The single-mission drones have one moment in the sun, or really, storm.
We're responsible for making sure it's not going to hang out there and go find a ship or go find another plane. So we make sure that the system will land on the water. It'll ditch into the water once we get all the data off of it.
This year, NOAA has implemented a number of upgrades in their system, their model forecasting, as well as some new tools that will help out when it comes to the forecasting for this hurricane season. This will lead to some changes for what they put out and what some of their graphics look like. The first is going to be with our tropical outlooks. Typically, in previous years, we've had outlooks that say the chance of development within the next 2 days, as well as the next 5 days. This year, we have chance of development for the next 2 days as well as the next 7 days. So it allows us to prepare and forecast for these tropical systems a little bit further in advance. We also will see upgrades to the forecasting of these tropical cones that they put out, the cones of uncertainty, towards the end of June. Some of their new forecast models will allow for 15% better forecasting for those tropical outlooks and for the cone of uncertainty. There's also some upgrades to our excessive rain outlook. Previously, you could only see 3 days in advance. This year, the excessive rain outlook will go up to 5 days in advance. With these tropical cyclones, hurricanes, as well as tropical storms, typically we see the most deaths and the most damage from a lot of the flooding that occurs either from rainfall or from the storm surge. So this will allow communities to better prepare. Their storm surge forecasting is also going to be improving. We'll now be able to run models for 2 systems at the same time, which will give us a better look at other future possibilities when it comes to the storm surge due to these systems.
During hurricane season, Georgia's coastline can get battered by storm surge, and our state's natural topography and ways of fighting this surge are being threatened by rising seas. Meteorologist Melissa Nord looks into a new push for strengthening our coast's resiliency.
A gem along Georgia's coastline.
We have over 380,000 acres of salt marsh in Georgia's coast. We have a fourth of all salt marsh on the Atlantic seaboard. That's a lot.
Is also one of our biggest guardians.
It protects us from storms, hurricanes.
Salt marshes absorb floodwaters and wave energy, decreasing property damage in nearby communities during hurricanes by up to 20%, according to NOAA. And it's a key player in limiting our carbon footprint. It can store carbon at a rate 10 times that of a mature tropical forest. But our marshland's ability to protect us from storms is declining because of climate change.
Climate change is actually being experienced today on Georgia's coast. Increased flooding, increased erosion, salt water moving further inland. And that creates a real challenge, not only for the people that live there, but for the ecosystems that have been there.
Changes that we may not see here in Atlanta are being felt along our coast.
As sea levels rise, marshes will naturally migrate upland because marshes occur at a specific elevation. So as waters rise, it will cover lower lying marsh, and marsh will move up the upland marsh boundary, so long as there's not an obstruction to it.
The brackish water during that migration creates ghost forests, poisoning trees that once relied on fresh water for sustenance. But when we develop near the marsh or build structures like bulkheads, the marsh has nowhere to go. Sediment buildup cannot keep up. The marsh ends up underwater. In a NOAA report this year, they expect another 3 feet of sea level rise by 2100. In a city like Savannah, this is what that looks like. Areas in white, once covered in marshland, get overtaken by the blue rising sea levels. Even with some of the marshes migrating further inland, we will lose part of our guardian of the coastline, a habitat for small fish and oysters, and the ability to sequester and store carbon. The Southern Atlantic Marsh Initiative, or SAMSI, is a network of more than 300 scientists, community members, and other advocates pushing for urgent efforts to make our coastlines more resilient. They just released a 10-year plan to protect the future of 1 million acres of salt marsh stretching from North Carolina to Florida, nearly the size of Grand Canyon National Park. It is a pathway to the protection, restoration, and migration of our salt marsh. Our way to guard our guardian against its greatest threats in a warming world. In Georgia, part of this plan includes obtaining funding to expand our network of living shorelines.
A natural alternative to a bulkhead or a hardened structure along the coastline in Georgia, especially in areas where you may be encountering erosion or strong wave energy along a private property or a public property. And so living shorelines is basically a way of using natural elements that are found in our coastline anyway, oyster shells, along the bank, along with native plants, to help create a more natural bank shoreline rather than a hardened concrete shoreline that helps attenuate wave energy, reduce flooding, and help protect that shoreline using a more natural system than regular concrete.
A novel concept at the turn of the century, these become equally or less expensive than its concrete alternative, and it provides a better habitat for the ecosystem.
As sea level rises, we're going to see it encroach further on land. By putting in living shorelines, that marsh will be able to move landward.
Several living shorelines have been installed in the southeast and are successfully protecting our coast from storm surge, helping prevent erosion and sediment loss that hurts our marshes. The plan also includes efforts to remove several non-natural barriers on the coast and to conserve higher ground near marshes to support marsh migration. Small efforts combined that can make one big push to strengthen the link between protecting our coastal ecosystems and our own uses on the coast.
It might not be apparent during your day-to-day activity up in Atlanta. So many people vacation at the coast and enjoy the coastal environment. It provides an opportunity for recreation, a place to find solitude. So many people find that coastal area beautiful. And I think it's important that we work to protect it, not only for us today, but for our children and our grandchildren in the future.
Guarding our guardian of the waterways. Meteorologist Melissa Nord, 11 Alive News.
Because the Georgia coast sees more significant flooding during events like hurricanes, scientists and engineers with Georgia Tech are installing a network of sea level sensors along the coast. They're meant to help with emergency planning and response during weather events. Meteorologist Melissa Nord spoke with one of the scientists behind the project.
Tell me a little bit about how the Smart Sea Level Sensors project came about.
So my background is computer science, networking technology at Georgia Tech. And so I come at this from what are the things we can do with low-cost sensors now that they're so widely available. And with the experience of some flooding events on the coast of Georgia and the lack of real insight and data, there were basically National Weather Service only operated 2 online weather stations along the coast of Georgia, and we just didn't have enough visibility. This project is about providing data about what's going on in our communities with regards to flooding and changing climate and the impacts on our daily lives, and having real information to share with folks. They come to us when we're installing about stories about we think it's flooding more, but we're not sure why, and we can help them understand that and really share that with others about what's really happening.
And one application with an example before these went in were Hurricanes Maria and Irma, right? Down in the Savannah area, they didn't have this many sensors of real-time data of what are the waters doing. Exactly.
And what we saw is that, what we continue to see is that with each storm event, there's really a different kind of impact around the community. Some places flood all the time, but many places only flood depending on which way the wind is blowing or how much rain there was or where we are in the tide cycle. So getting that local visibility into how different storms flood in different areas, that's part of what this project allows us to do.
You can stay connected to the latest forecast and any special tropical alerts with the 11 Alive app. Head to the weather section of the app, click Explore Radar Map, and then click on the button for map layers. You'll scroll down and toggle on Tropical Tracks so you can see the latest forecast track cones issued by the National Hurricane Center.